what's going on? I have the guest on today's podcast. Got SJ Barakony from the Buckeye State. What's going on, SJ?
Oh, lots of great things, Brett. And I wanted to not pass up the opportunity to thank you so much for you and your very kind invite to be on your podcast. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I know we've already chatted for about 15 minutes. You're probably one of the most interesting people that I've came across in a while. And you even have your own artificial intelligence taking notes on this podcast. So if you guys need the transcript version, you want to read this, then we'll probably have that. Right, SJ?
Very likely, if it works the way if it works the way it's supposed to work, Brett, we will absolutely have a written transcript of what we're talking about.
Love that. Love that. All right, man. Hey, before we're going to get into a lot of different topics that I typically don't talk about that much. We typically interview successful business guys and women going beyond success and to whatever they're kind of doing. And we're going to talk a lot about this today, but you describe yourself, SJ, number one, as a futurist, a super connector, and you're really, let's talk about education and what's going on in the modern world with education and our workforce. But before I really dive deep into that, let's talk about you for a second. So who is SJ Barakony?
Excellent question. And I always appreciate when I get that one because it aligns with something that I read 9 years ago, Brett, and that was Simon Sinek's Start With Why. The why someone exists and what they're delivering into the marketplace of ideas and execution, action is very important because you can talk all day long about the what, but I think the why outranks it by a factor of at least 10, if not more. So, and then of course the who shapes the why. So there's a interplay between those two. So who am I? Number one is I would say that I am someone who is very concerned about certain things in our society. So rather than just being concerned and then outsourcing that to some third party, I decided to use the vehicle of entrepreneurship to become a solutions provider. So number one, concerned. Number two, entrepreneurial. Number three, solutions provider. I also am a believer in the root definition of what is called liber or libertas, which when translated into the modern parlance is equal to leadership, organic leadership, lifelong learning, so learning as a practice day to day, and then lastly, liberty. So I want to bring all three of those to the forefront through what I am doing and how I am delivering it. So the who leads to those other questions. And then the last thing I would add on to this is I am very much a champion for people who take their inherent gifts, their skills, and a desire to be a better version of themselves into the market and then offer that to people who truly need what they have. So of course we can define that as free enterprise, and free enterprise, you overlay entrepreneurship onto it and you get what I consider to be a very powerful solution, a very powerful delivery method for both the present and for where we're going. So that would be, I'm a champion for that. So that would be how I'd wrap up that question.
Yeah. No, I love that. You're very clear. Sometimes that question honestly trips up people. They're like, who am I? I don't know. Right? You're very clear on that answer. And I love Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. I've been kind of digging into that more and realized that some of my habits that I was doing weren't progressing me into the best version of myself that God has designed me to be. So yeah, I've been really digging into that myself. Well, let's just kind of like talk about, you are a futurist. What is that, SJ? What's a futurist?
Well, if you were just to do a general lookup, Brett, or anyone in your audience, of course, like a lot of different search terms, you're going to get a lot of different answers. However, here's how I would define it. It is someone who has an orientation pointed towards the possibilities, the potentialities, and the road ahead of us versus the road already traveled. So does that mean that if you are in a metaphorical or a physical vehicle that you do not look out the rearview mirror? Of course not. There is a value in looking out a rearview mirror. Okay. However, one way to look at it is the windshield oftentimes, if not always, bigger than the window in the back of the vehicle, right? So you have this big forward-looking windshield, and you have possibility thinking. You have responses that are sitting out in a green field, or sometimes they've already been practiced in reality. And these oftentimes will have the potential, there's that word again, to solve the challenges in the present. But it does take some elements of courage. It takes some elements of creativity, of curiosity, and counterintuitiveness in some cases to become and step into the futurist shoes. And within the last 5 or so years, I have taken and put on those shoes, found that they fit, and I have now taken a lot of steps into that future, thereby becoming a committed futurist.
I love it. I love it. Again, you're very clear on your definitions. I really appreciate that. One thing that we talked about a little bit that you are extremely passionate about is schooling and, well, education. You have the Education Sherpa, which you designed, and we can dive into that a little bit. But really, I just want to dive into your opinions on school, on education, on how we do both school and how we learn in education. So take us, like, what is your opinion on how we do learning in school right now?
That is a very multifaceted question, and I will do my best to unravel it here. It'll probably be about 3 or 4 pieces in the end, only because of time, because this is the kind of topic you can literally build an entire conference around. Right. But I'm glad to hit it at a somewhat higher level because it is indeed very important to me. And it should be important to everyone in your audience. It should be important to everyone in my network, and obviously all the ripples beyond them. So here's the way I look at it. First of all, probably somewhere between 10 and 20% of the people that are in the current superstructure, the current system, are the ones that truly are true believers in it. And since it is the status quo, it does represent mostly the past as well as a chunk of the present, definitely not the future of education. They are also known in some modalities as laggards, okay? So they will stick with what they know until what they know almost literally disappears, okay? So to those people, especially if they happen to be in your audience, I am not being critical. I'm not condemning you, but I am just framing it that, like with any other thing that has happened throughout human history, there's always roughly 10 to 20% that stick with what they know until literally what they know is literally almost completely past them. And then they finally will jump to whatever it is that is now current. So to the rest of you all, the 80 to 90%, some of you are like me and you sit in that visioneering chair. You sit in that chair of being a creator, being a builder, being an innovator, okay? Some of you are early adopters and you will capture in a bottle the lightning that we are creating in our laboratories of entrepreneurship. And then some of you will eventually pick up on it once you get some basic questions answered, and maybe you drop a little bit of your skepticism, which is inherent in the human condition, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first part of my answer, is to put a little framing around the people, because sometimes people get awfully defensive when they hear about things like this, because they're thinking, oh, I'm being attacked. Yeah. No.
Right.
It's the system. It is the structure, okay? That is where I am facing, that's where I put all my emphasis on, okay? So the first thing I say about that then is, number one, the way we are delivering what most people call education, but really isn't, is not working for about the same percentage of people that are not the laggards, if you will. And it's not working because it's mediocre, average at best, and in some cases it's outright not working. So 80 to 90% of people in classrooms right now are getting that kind of result. Mm-hmm. But if the water is a certain temperature, if the water is a certain color, if the water tastes a certain way, you don't know any better. You're the fish.
Right. Swimming in it.
You're swimming in it, and until you're exactly. So unless you're introduced to a different fishbowl or to a tank or to the wide open ocean, you don't know any better. So that is the first thing, is framing the rest of the populace. Then the next piece is, I believe there are 4 status quo forces that are holding back the dam, if you will. They're basically serving as the dam that's holding back the rest of the innovation and the rest of the ingenuity. And that would be the existing system, of course, because again, it doesn't know any better. Number 2 is the political class, because they usually use it as a vote buying mechanism. Like, we will deliver X, and they never really deliver it, but they get your vote and then they move on to the next election. Mm-hmm. The third is conventional corporations, because conventional corporations enjoy the existing system because their forebears, the original corporations, as they rose in, especially in the 19th century, in the robber baron era, they literally had a seat at the table with the academic elites, and they designed this system. So all these generations later, corporations still are fully bought into what's already there. And then lastly, the media. The media has very little interest in solving anything. They just love to create problem identification and problem amplification, and they rarely, if ever, play in the sandbox of solutions. Mm-hmm. So that's the next piece to understand, is who is holding it back. Next is to understand that education, credentialism, and schooling are not to be considered the same. Schooling is an attempt to push things into people. Education is meant to draw out what's already there. Okay. So you already have a gift inside of you. You have skills that are more inherent to you than your neighbor, to your brother, to your cousin, etc. Right? That's what education is when you properly define it. Okay. Schooling pushes in. It's equivalent in the business world to interruption marketing. Education in the business world is equivalent to permission-based marketing, where you seek the permission of the person to offer you something that will help you. Okay. And then credentialism sits in the middle and basically says, we are going to give you a piece of paper if you do a certain amount of seat-based time for a certain amount of dollars, which are oftentimes grossly inflated because of the third-party payer problem, because we got too many third parties in the middle of the free enterprise transaction. So until we nicely kick them out and have a true free enterprise transaction, we are going to get way too much credentialism and not enough education. Okay. And then the last piece of this is to look at the fact that we need to unleash grassroots entrepreneurial energy into the system. And that can come in so many different forms. It could be parents forming their own school. It could be It could be grandparents saying, well, the parents are working, they truly can't create the time, but here we are, we have a lot of life experience, let us home educate, or let us take some of our wealth that maybe we saved up because we were a better class of people in terms of understanding, savings over consumption, and let's go off and hire a teacher who does not like the existing system. Let's create a learning pod. Okay. Or let's go off and say that we are going to vote with our feet, vote with our wallet, and we're going to go to a state that has a more free enterprise where we've kicked out most of the third parties, if not all of them. And one of the states right now that's leading the way is the state of Arizona. Okay. Very free enterprise state when it comes to the delivery methods. So that would be my 4 parts, building upon the main foundation that I started with. And I know there's a lot of meat on this bone, so hopefully I was able to give you some structuring.
Yeah. No, definitely. So it sounds like, you don't agree with the current system. You believe, I think even before you said it's the same system that we've been using for years. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, same type of system, sitting in the class, getting the information. But you're also the futurist, so let's just kind of transition to that. So let's talk about, here's where we're at, and what do you see for the future of schooling and education and with our kids, maybe our kids' kids?
Absolutely. And now this is where you take what I mentioned earlier, Brett, that challenge and response continuum. And that's where the futurist lies, is he or she, they truly believe they have a response to the challenges of today. Or in this case, the challenges that have carried over from the past, because we're using a 100-plus-year-old system. Okay. A lot of possibilities here, a lot of potentialities. So I'll share some of them. Not meant to be an exhaustive list, but I also don't believe in feeding people with a fire hose, especially if they might be hearing some of this for the first time, right? Because remember, you got these 4 very strong status quo elements that are going to do whatever they can to hold back where we should be already. We should be certainly much farther than we are now, but kudos to all the innovators who have cracked through as many ways through the dam that they can, because it's sort of like plugging holes in it with a finger, right? Eventually it's going to crack. So some possibilities. First, we're going to continue to decentralize the delivery. Okay. So when you decentralize, you take these centralized, highly bureaucratic, hierarchical delivery models, which tend to be physical. They tend to have multiple buildings, lots of different layers, lots of people that are directly involved in the client customer versus the person delivering the instruction. And you need to disperse them. Okay. Again, 80 to 90% of these people are really quality, good people. And it's just the rest of them that are holding on for dear life to what they understand. And they also tend to be very cynical. Okay. So first thing is we're going to continue to decentralize. Okay. More micro schools, more cooperatives, more learning pods. Even some of the more conventional private options out there, your faith-based schools, Catholic and Protestant and such, Jewish. I think you will see some influx into them as well. Okay. I'm not so much sold on the secular private model as much as I am on the faith-based private, because I think there's enough of a movement into what some might call the third or fourth great awakening to see some people say, you know what, I'm going to a church, I'm going to a synagogue, and there's a school attached to it, and why don't I have my own kids in it? That kind of thinking, right? So I think you'll see some of the more old guard solutions have a fresh look at them, right? But then you're also going to have a lot more of these new models. Next, we need to disconnect the remaining chains that are connecting most families and households, and by extension, businesses and other stakeholders, to the geographical construct of the late 1800s system that is still predominant. And what do I mean by that is we need to have the dollars follow the household, follow the family, follow the student, and not the entrenched system. Arizona, once again, for anyone in this, who might be in the state of Arizona, please applaud your elected officials, because they had to beat back those 4 pillars and say that we are going to create a truly liberty-based model, free enterprise, where we're going to eliminate as many of those third-party actors as possible. Okay. So I think we're going to see more states follow the Arizona model, and we're going to decouple that geographical anchor that says that you have to go to this district to play sports. You have to go to this district to get this delivered, And one of the very first steps, even if you don't go all the way as Arizona, is you can say that it's open enrollment. So in other words, you could send your kid to a district 50 miles away as long as you're willing to get him or her there, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So that's even a very simple step, is opening the enrollment and saying, you know what, we're not going to force you to attend the school around the corner. Okay. So that's the next step, is we have to decouple that geographical chain, that anchor. Okay. Third is we're going to see an unbundling for older kids and adults. We're going to see an unbundling of the conventional credentialism into what are called nano and micro credentials. And there's also a term called digital badging. Okay. Someone who is looking for conventional employment, let alone if they want to build up their LinkedIn profile as an entrepreneur, all they need to do is say, hey, I've pursued some skills-based brushing up of something, or I've learned a brand new skill, have a little badge. And especially if you use the blockchain and a smart contract to represent it, you can eliminate some of the fraud and such that have sunk a lot of for-profit institutions in the past. Okay. Because here's the thing. It's not about credentialism that matters. It's what was delivered. Okay. And if there is a piece of paper, it should be something that is based upon real world life readiness versus just something to boost up a piece of paper that in the end will not have as much value. Okay. So make the paper meaningful, again, is what I'm saying. Okay. And then one last thing I could point to, because again, there's a lot more I can get into, but we'll keep it higher level. The last thing in the future is we want to integrate a couple things that the conventional classrooms of today literally fail to cover at all. Number one, we need to integrate soft life interpersonal people skills. That needs to be de facto. Okay. And there's a lot of them. I created a package last year when I was working with a startup, for example, and I came up with almost 50 of those skills. Very subjective. You might come up with less, you might come up with more, but we need to be delivering these as a part of true education. And then lastly, we need to interweave the future of work, which is heavily based on an independent workforce model. We need to weave that into our classrooms so when people come out, they are prepared for it, not prepared for a 1950s model of W-2 employment, but a 2020 and 2030s model of where you are going to be seeking work and not a job. So those are some thoughts that I will share with your audience.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds awesome. I mean, number one, the decentralizing kind of, I'm with you, not just schooling, but other areas too. I've been talking to a lot of people because I'm one of the people that do go to church, and that's another thing that we've been talking about. It's same type of little bit of a system, right, of the big buildings, and that's a lot where the money kind of goes into that. That's a different topic on a different day. But so the future of school, in your opinion, is going to look a lot different. We've already seen some of that, obviously, with the pandemic. It's shaking things up a little bit. Well, let's just talk about after school, because obviously your other passion, and as a futurist, you've talked about a little bit, touched on the workforce, the work development, not getting the job, more entrepreneurial. And so talk about this a little bit, schooling and then how it relates to, okay, now you're out of school, you've gotten these skills, you've gotten the credentials into the workforce. What do you think the workforce is going to look like in 2030, 2040? Talk to us about that.
There is a lot of exciting possibility and potentiality here as well. And again, they play in the same Venn diagram. So here's some thoughts in this space. First, I mentioned a few minutes ago, but it's worth repeating because again, if in your audience, Brett, there's people who may have never heard this, or maybe they were skeptical or cynical, I implore you, be open-minded about this, okay? Do not allow fear to be your driver. Okay, you are hearing some stuff out there, and some of it is because of those 4 boat anchors that are holding back education, but in many respects are also holding back work, okay, aka commerce. Okay, so make sure you do your best to filter what you're listening to, because what you put into this brain, which is essentially $1 trillion piece of real estate, is very important. Okay. So keep as many of the cynics and the unhealthy skeptics out. Use an Airbnb model, lock them out and don't let them in. Because Airbnb recently banned parties. So you don't want a party of cynics and unhealthy skeptics in your head. Okay.
True.
All right. So first, what I mentioned a few minutes ago, the decentralization of the delivery of commerce, meaning you're going to be paid for something to provide something. What you provide might be a service, it might be a product, or it might be something that doesn't get enough attention. So I do mention as much as I can, Brett, is you can be paid and monetize specialized knowledge that can add value to society. So knowledge is an intangible. For those in the audience that are more accounting, bookkeeping based, you might have heard of intangibles, right? Goodwill, if you will, and GAAP, right? So goodwill and GAAP would be the equivalent of monetizing specialized knowledge as someone in the future of work. And it's already done now, even in the present. It's just not recognized enough because too many people have an industrial age lens, okay? Scrap the industrial age. Please move on from it. It did its job. It took a country that was heavily agricultural and brought it into a new era, but that era is now past and we need to let it go. Okay. So that's the first thing, is the decentralization. And then number 2, following closely, is let go of the industrial age. And if you don't know what that means, you and I in the audience can talk about that separately, because there's a lot of moving pieces in that. And again, it's those 4 main actors that are propping up the industrial age. Another thing in the future is, again, and I said this earlier, but I need to repeat this again, is you're not going to be looking for a job. You're going to be looking for work. Work has been improperly defined as I am going to work. Okay. Or I am at work. Okay. Work should not be defined as a place. Work should be defined as a unit of what you are pursuing in order to be compensated. Okay. So the unit is not a job anymore. The unit is work, and work can come in many forms. A project with a defined end, beginning and end. A gig, you're delivering something, maybe in an Amazon vehicle or something. It could be defined as a freelance engagement. It could be defined as a temporary position where you're filling in for someone who is pursuing paternity or maternity leave, for example. Okay. It could be defined as being a solopreneur, self-employed. It could be defined as paid interns. Okay. In other words, the future is not a job as the unit, it's work. So redefine and be careful on how you are using the word work. It is not a place. It is a unit of commerce and transaction between 2 parties. Okay. And then another thing to keep in mind in the future is, again, we are moving towards a skill-based model versus so-called experience. Okay. resumes are slow but surely going to become obsolete. You should be focusing on what skills do you bring to the table rather than a bunch of keywords and a bunch of buzzwords that really don't have a whole lot of value on either side of the transaction. Mm-hmm. Resumes are a wonderful flashing thing that they flash like neon, the neon burns out, and then you have a result that neither party really likes. Usually the person hired is not who they were supposed to be. And then the place that you thought was going to be this place is not what they represented themselves as. So we need to eliminate that, and we need to focus on skills, and we need to focus on what you're bringing to the table rather than a bunch of buzzing keywords and a bunch of paper that in the end game are not as meaningful as they should be. Mm-hmm. So, and then lastly, you need to have a much better understanding the future of work of entrepreneurialism. Not saying you have to pursue it, but you need to embrace what it is and stop falling into a lot of this class warfare that seems to never go away. Okay. There shouldn't be warfare among classes as long as you offer people opportunity. Opportunity comes in many forms, but one of the way opportunity comes is you actually offer true education and you offer meaningful work. There's the key. When either or both of those are absent, people start to get envious, people start to get jealous, they get greedy, and they start to make assumptions, and they create straw man arguments and all this other stuff that does no good, because debate and argument rarely go anywhere. So we need to eliminate that, and we need to understand that free enterprise is a great thing, but it's when you start involving third parties and you stop offering opportunity and you deliver inferior schooling and such, that's when this stuff starts to bubble to the surface. So we need to eliminate that in the future, and I think we have a lot of possibilities there. So again, a lot of things going on in my answer, but hopefully it frames a little better for you and your audience.
Yeah. Number one, I love your answers, and I just kind of love making me think, honestly. And a lot, you can take one of these topics and really dig in and do a whole series of podcasts on just one of these different things. Unfortunately, we're about out of time, and I know we dug into really just scratch the surface on what you are all about and what you are guiding people into. But I want to give you just an opportunity to share. You have the Education Sherpa. You are teaching people about this, and it sounds like you're really starting and creating a movement into the future and getting people to become aware, right? I think that's one of the first things, is to become aware. And I think the second step is to kind of cleanse ourselves of these ideas that we've been living and ingrained for so long, before we can really tackle what you're talking about. So, but if someone's interested in what you're offering and what if they want more of this, how can you help them?
Thank you for the opportunity. It does take the form of saying, okay, so now you're listening, you're thinking, you're allowing your heart, your spirit, your soul to be open, right? Just like you just summed up very well. But now there's action to be taken, okay? And it doesn't mean that we have to do instant gratification action, but we need to take steps forward. I'm going to paraphrase from one of my other favorite movies. It's actually a whole series. In Creed 2, Rocky Balboa had already become the mentor for Adonis Creed, right? And he said something to Adonis in that movie that has stuck with me. And he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing it, I'm not reading off of anything in the background, but he basically said, one step forward, one step forward. Okay. So again, that's a paraphrase. Feel free to watch the movie or look up the full phrase for the rest of it. But that's what you need to do here. So now how do you do that with me? First of all, I am one of others who would identify as future of work people, future of education, futurists generally. So I don't claim I have the franchise on this, but I do believe that I am called. It's a vocation for me So an occupation is okupar, which means to take up space and time. And a vocation is vokar, which means to be called to do something. It's a higher plane. Okay. So for me, this is a vocation. So first of all, I would encourage you to look in the mirror and say, are you in an occupation or a vocation? And if you're in an occupation, trust me, I was there in the past. In other podcast appearances, I've discussed that at length. Okay. So that's the first thing. Now, how would you contact? Well, behind me on the screen, my name is so unique. SJ is my name. It's not initials. My last name, as you heard it pronounced, is Barakony. It's 4 syllables, pure Hungarian. So it's not going to be confused with Smith anytime soon. Right. So if you look up that name on any of your podcasting platforms, whatever your favorite is, I'm not going to give any plugs to any of them. If you look up that name, you'll see other podcast appearances. So feel free to listen, watch some of those, and get a better sense of who I am before you even reach out if you wish, right? Secondly, pop that name into LinkedIn, connect with me. Send me a message, say, hey, I heard your podcast. I somehow tapped into Brett's podcast and I really like what you said. Would love to get to know you better. Send me a message. I literally live on LinkedIn. Third, on Instagram, that's my other platform that I've chosen to stick with from the legacy options. You won't find my name per se easily, but you will find the Education Sherpa. So the Education Sherpa, okay? So those would be 2 ways, legacy social media. I'm pretty sure, Brett, I gave to you and your assistant my email address, and I think I gave, if not, I'll happily give it for show notes, my scheduler. Like a lot of folks, I use a digital scheduler, which connects to my calendar. So that's another way. Book a little bit of time with me, okay? So we get to know each other, okay? So an email using a scheduler works very, very well. And those would probably be the best ways at this stage. And obviously down the line, who knows, a phone call might be of value too, because, hey, I'm a Gen Xer and I do still talk on the phone. I do not use one of those smart devices just for data only. Right. Okay. So I'm the bridge generation. I'm the generation, Brett, that we don't hear a lot about Gen Xers. You hear a lot about the boomers all the time, which is fantastic. You hear about the millennials constantly. You're now hearing a lot about the Zoomers, but the Xers are just that hidden generation.
I'm a Gen X too, so. Right.
So I am the bridge, and it sounds like you are as well. We can actually talk, and we can actually do data on these things. So yes, I'm not opposed to talking on the phone as well. Awesome. So there you go. Those are the way to reach out. And I look forward to seeing how I can be of value to anyone, because at minimum, if I'm not the answer for you, I am a known super connector, so I can easily find someone else to connect you to if it's not me as the best answer in a free enterprise world. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share all that.
Yeah. Thanks, SJ. We're going to put that all in our show notes on our YouTube channel, guys, so check that out. And I would just encourage you, if you're listening, to, again, maybe listen to this again. Listen to some of the other podcasts that SJ has been on. Look at what he's doing with the Education Sherpa. Start to take maybe just one step. Right? I mean, that's how you grow consistently, just 1% forward each day, each week. And obviously, this is very fascinating. And I think as entrepreneurs, most business guys, we do our show for a lot of business people, and we always want to be kind of at that ground level, maybe that movement. We always want to be part of something, make a difference. And this, I think, could be something. So I appreciate you, SJ, being on the podcast. God bless you, buddy.
Thank you again so very much. Many blessings to you and your family and to your audience. And again, the opportunity, I am most grateful for it.
Thank you. We'll see ya.